Hi, Bookish Baddies, and welcome back to Bookish Chaos. I'm Shay, and today we're holding the lapel mic because if I clip it to my shirt, you can barely hear me, and I can't find the adapter end for my microphone that has a stand. So, this is what we're doing. Today, we are talking about the book and the controversy surrounding the book, which is Firebird by Juliet Cross. So, before we start, make sure that you like the channel and click the bell for notifications so that you get notified every time that I post. So, this is the first book in the Fire That Binds series. It is set in ancient Rome where dragons rule the world, dragon shifters. Story starts, and we have Melina, who is our FMC, and she is at her Romani encampment, and some Romans show up. Some are warriors. One of them is a thing called a centurion. She can tell that he's a dragon shifter because she has abilities. So she dances in front of him and makes a big show of like dancing for him specifically. And he flips her a coin that she's like, it looks really special. So after this is all done, she sneaks away from her little encampment after everybody has left and the party celebration fair is done. And she's in a, what is that word? A clearing. She's in a clearing in the forest, and he appears, and they're talking about the coin, and he tells her that it is a coin for the goddess Fortuna, and then he just leaves. So we skip forward. That was the prologue. 4 years later, chapter one, we are. We realize it is. Hold that thought. I have to go get the book. Okay, it is 4 years later. We are in Julian's POV, and he is a general in Caesar's army, and they are attacking a Celtic village that hasn't been taken 4 years, multiple attempts because of a witch who lives within the Celtic village. But so they win the battle, and he heads to where the witch is currently being cornered and sees Melina. And Julian is the centurion who was watching her dance. One of his men is very vividly stating the terrible sexual things that he is going to do to her. And Julian loses it, shifts into a dragon, rips the guy apart, grabs Melina with his claws, flies away to home to Rome, shifts back, and bam, now she's a slave in his home. Here is the controversy. So, the controversy. Readers quickly found out that this was to be a slave master romance with no trigger warning, no content warning at the beginning of the book. I would just like to say, I have the book. I can tell you that it does not have any kind of warning. I did not purchase this book. I was gifted it by someone who was gifted it by someone else. But I mean, it is very beautiful. Oh, I can't get it to focus on it. It's focusing on me. So there's like a dragon up here, Rome down here. It's beautiful. Okay, so I don't know if the author didn't want to spoil anything by providing content warnings or trigger warnings, but that was distasteful in my opinion. Some people feel that this portrays a problematic power dynamic, which I don't disagree with, while others are arguing that the historical setting of ancient Rome, such dynamics are contractually appropriate in the case of it being ancient Rome. Juliet Cross has addressed this by highlighting the book's dark themes and historical context. She emphasized that it is a work of fiction set in a brutal era aiming to portray that time period. On the 29th of March 2025, she posted an Instagram post stating, while Firebird is set in a reimagined ancient Rome, the same brutality and cruelty is present as it was in the Roman Empire. Possibly even worse, since this reimagined world contains the power of dragons. This is a dark romantasy with dark themes, including a master slave relationship, attempted not between the male and not between the main characters. I don't remember what the post says. It either says sexual assault. I'm reading from my notes. Attempted sexual assault, essentially not between the main characters. Dubious consent, not between the main characters. Anyone sensitive to these topics, please take note. This book may not be for you. That being said, this book in the series is ultimately about finding oneself, finding freedom, and finding love. She did, it turns out, put out a warning prior to the release. This warning. She did put out this warning prior to the release. I'm assuming that she received feedback from ARC readers who were like, just so you know, you should have trigger warnings. Also, this could be very problematic for you. However, not every reader who would be bothered by this will follow authors. So just putting out an Instagram post doesn't necessarily stop the harm from happening. And I realize that books, especially when they are being published by a publisher, you hit a certain point where you can't stop it and do an addendum and put in trigger warnings. So, first run, sure, I could understand it, but the second run, in my opinion, should have had the warnings put in. I am sure that this special edition was not necessarily the absolute first thing that they put out. They should have been put in later editions. So the book community is divided. Some think that it was bold to try it, while others think it was insensitive and inappropriate. The slave master dynamic is difficult because in this case, Julian has full control over her body in the master power dynamic. Therefore, consent is not technically able to be given because of the power dynamic. It's basically a coercion versus consent. Using slave and master dynamic for some can be seen as minimizing the very real rape and assault that happened to slaves in our real world via their masters in history. Many readers take issue with not only the trope, but how it was marketed and presented. I understand that some authors think that trigger warnings could spoil what is in the book, and that's kind of, in my opinion, just a risk that you run. If you're someone who needs trigger warnings, it's not spoiling anything for you. If you're someone who doesn't need trigger warnings and you read it, it could spoil it for you. But people who don't have very many trigger warnings often don't read the trigger warnings. So therefore, it wouldn't technically spoil anything in the book. This book was marketed as a romantasy. So putting the slave that there a warning that there is a slave master dynamic wouldn't have technically spoiled anything. You know that the main characters are going to end up together because it's a freaking romantasy. For those who need the trigger warnings, then know not to read your book. Putting them in there isn't going to lose you a reader, but it could anger people. Some people, like me, can dive into basically any book and not be triggered by it. I have one trigger that will push me over the edge, and almost nobody goes there. So that's not really a problem for me. People like me who aren't easily offended or bothered by so the warnings being there don't do anything for me. It doesn't offend me. It makes me comforted that there are people who need them who get them. Authors who write fiction have the option to just not use parts of true history if they wanted. Fiction doesn't need to be historically accurate. It's fiction. It is world building. However, if you are going to use things like this, it is the author's responsibility to explore the moral weight of what they are writing about instead of just using it as a tantalizing part of a story. Some people didn't think that Juliet addressed it with the importance that they felt it needed. So that's basically the controversy. Now, my thoughts, we're going to start with my thoughts on the controversy and then the book itself. I do understand both sides of the point. Do I think that authors need to, if they're putting anything touchy remotely in their books, should they include trigger or content warnings? Yes. We live in a world where being considerate isn't that hard. It's not that hard to be like, these are the big things that'll probably hurt you. Now, do I think that they need to be 12 pages long because someone doesn't like a, that people have a foot fetish? No. But there are big things like anything to do with consent needs to be in there, anything to do with like pregnancy or miscarriage, because those things are very traumatic for a lot of women and they need to know if there's going to be a miscarriage, if so they're going to have hard pregnancy, things like that that can those are very real world problems currently today that women experience that need to be warned about. Would authors adding trigger warnings stop a lot of the hate that they get? Yes. There are certain situations, for example, the trigger warnings on Pawn and the Puppet, not good enough. Most of the things that are in Pawn and the Puppet should not have been written about. I'm just saying. If you're not going to talk about mental health issues in an appropriate way and not demonize them, then you don't need to be writing about them. But that's just my opinion. This is not about that book. So back to lessening the hate that they give. If people were more informed about this situation, I'm sure that it would have helped her not get as much hate. There are other moral implications that not many people are talking about that I've seen, which is the history of the Romani people. I can't speak for them or the fact of if this was if this was an insensitive portrait of them because I'm not from that culture. So I have not personally seen any people who come from, and I think Romani is the sensitive word to use. We don't use the G word anymore to describe those people. But as for the book, Juliet has stated that it is a dark romantasy. I personally am a separator of the two. So there are romantasy books with dark themes, and then there is dark romance or dark romantasy. This book, in my opinion, is a romantasy book with dark themes. I consume dark romance for fun. This book was not that. I personally, and this could get a lot of hate, I didn't think the dynamic was as terrible as people made it out to be. Not legally in the book, but verbally. he did decide that she was free before anything sexual happened between them. He was like, "You are not a slave to me," which is not the same as her being legally freed, but for safety reasons, he couldn't just be like, "I'm freeing my slave." Their dynamic, in my opinion, wasn't truly master slave at the point that they started being sexual together. She pretty much, she pretty much did whatever she wanted, and he let her. Like, the only time that he put his foot down with her on anything was when it was dangerous for her safety. Anything terrible that happened to her after she was in his house in a dubcon or non-con kind of way was not done by him. It was done by someone else. She participated in the blood ritual that happens to keep up the ruse that she was still Julian's slave. But he went to her and he asked her, "Will you do this?" She went willingly into the arms of another man who intended and succeeded in hurting her to protect Julian. Julian did not send her. Julian wanted to get her out of town. And she was like, "No, I'm going to do this. I can protect myself." And when that situation became too much for her, she yelled down the bond that they have, and he blew up all of the plans that were being made to rescue her and keep her as safe as he could. I would like to say that everyone's feelings are valid. Everyone is entitled to their opinions about this book. At the end of the day, that's just the truth. This is a work of fiction. This was not done in a way to be intentionally harmful or intentionally misrepresent any situation. And the book overall, I don't think is harmful. As for the book itself, the writing is good. I quite enjoy the way that Juliet writes. Her narrative voice for everyone is really good. The plot was slow. It did, however, follow a structure. We had peaks and valleys in the timeline. So we start here and then things are good. She leaves the household. Her family gets murdered. Things get bad. She finds a new family. These are all like, okay, so she leaves. She ends up with the Celtic people because her family dies and things get really bad. He rescues her, and then we're still down here. He rescues her. But as she lives with him, things start to get good again. And then she leaves the household and things get bad. And then the book ends up here in a way that they are both technically safe. Things are happening behind the scenes, but they are both currently safe. And you can move into book two if that is something you want for yourself. It is not the best book I've ever read. I'm giving it a 2-star rating because it was enjoyable enough that I kept reading it and the writing was good, but it didn't suck me in. I don't plan on reading the second book. I just read this book and I immediately had to jump into book two and book three, and I'm almost done with book three, and I'll be done with book four very shortly. In a matter of days, I've gone through multiple books because the book sucked me in. This book did not do that. It took me a while to read through it just because it didn't suck me in. The writing wasn't bad. I just wasn't having a great time. So I would love to know how you feel about Firebird. If you've read it, if you agree, or even if you disagree with me, let's have a dialogue in the comments. Explain to me why you think it was more harmful than I thought it was. You know, I'm open to hearing people's opinions. I mean, it's not going to change my opinion about this book, but I would love to have a dialogue in the comments where we can all talk about it. I want this book channel to be a safe space where people can have differing opinions and we can talk about things and everybody can feel safe. So I hope that this review didn't turn anybody off from watching my reviews. We're all entitled to our opinions. So go ahead and like this video if you like this video. Share it with all your friends. Share it with other people who read this book so we can have more dialogue. Make sure that you like, I said like this video. My brain is not working today. I was planning on doing this video days ago, so now I've run out of brain space. Um, Subscribe to the channel. If you don't subscribe to the channel, you, my friend, are just a person who likes books. You are not a bookish baddie. Only bookish baddies subscribe to Bookish Chaos. So I will see you next time, guys. Have a great one.